like to call Special Services Committee meeting to order. It is 6:10. First item on our agenda is approval of January 16th, 2020 Special Services minutes.
So moved. Second.
Okay, discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Second on our agenda is enrollment data.
The enrollment is up 14 students from the last report. We've had a few move-ins in the early elementary. We're down 17 students at the middle school. Some of them have moved to homeschool. And are up 4 at Bud Carlson and down 5 at the high school. So I'm assuming that those kids probably made the move over to Bud Carlson. And we're above what the projected enrollment was. We continue to maintain a high number of students in the 4th grade at William Allen, but the rest of the class sizes are hovering around the 20 student mark.
Any questions, comments? Mr. Lynch?
You said we're up overall for the start of the year to now, Sandy?
From the last report, so from December, we're up, or January, I'm sorry, we're up 14 students. It looks like we are, just go back to September, we are down from September.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, there being none, the third item is bus data.
We continue to run buses with enough space for the students, and the runs are on time, and we haven't really even had any complaints with the winter, so it's been running smoothly, knock on wood.
Any questions or comments? Okay. Fourth item is attendance data with the Challenge 5.
If you look at the attendance data from December 1920 to January 1920, you're going to see an increase, and that is mostly attributed to blizzard bag days. So we've had 3 blizzard bag days, and if students don't turn in their blizzard bags, they're counted as absent. We've also had a couple snow days where they haven't been snow days for our district, but people have not sent their students to school, and there's been a high instance of the flu this winter as well. So although it looks alarming, we've gone over it together, and it's not too bad. Yes?
Are we still hitting the 80% for blizzard bags now?
We made the 80% for the 3 days that we had.
Any other questions or comments?
Good question.
Yes.
So we have to hit 80% for the blizzard. What's the average attendance for a regular school day?
I don't have the
Is
actual
it like 93 or something like
percentage.
that? Or
I'm trying to look back at what we had last month.
just wondering how it compares to the blizzard.
So it looks like between 78, 81% at the high school made the Challenge 5, so
I'm talking about a regular school day. What's the average
Yeah.
attendance, do you know?
I
It
don't
just be
know.
something
Justin,
that
do you have it for your high school?
About 93%.
93%, thank you, yeah.
Somehow that was in my head.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know what it is at the elementary. Adam, do you know what your average is for the
I
middle
think
school?
it's similar in the range to Justin, just over 90%.
Is there an elementary school principal in the house? No. I can find
so the
out.
blizzard bag obviously is,
It's
we're
not
not
as high.
getting as good of attendance as we had during regular, so that's
Yeah,
something
and that
to
80 is
look
an
at.
average of elementary
Right.
school and high school, so all the way,
Yeah,
and they pull each other through to the 80, but
yeah.
yeah. We definitely need to increase. Mhm.
So what is our average for blizzard bags?
It's right at 80%.
Looks like
Yeah. I think we were 81 the second blizzard bag and 80 for the third.
Any other questions or comments on attendance? Okay. Item 5, special education update. Mrs. Allison?
So Christian Allison presents quarterly written reports, but she had presented a report last month and you had a few questions about it. So she came tonight to answer any questions that you might have about that report.
So I think, yep, coming over here.
Have a seat.
Okay. I think last time, the questions maybe you had for Sandy were the number of students that we have that are court placed. So just in order to ensure confidentiality, I'll say that we have less than 10. And then I think there was a question about, do we service students at St. Elizabeth Seton? And the answer to that is yes, we service them, whether or not they are from Rochester or a different surrounding district. And we service them through our IDEA funds. I don't know if there were any other questions that were generated.
Those were the ones I had written down.
Mrs. Stokes?
I have a question because we're going into a budget actually right now. Specifically pertaining to the out-of-district students, do you have a breakdown of what it is for services that we can't give them versus why they're going out of district? Not counting court appointed, because I understand that that's not necessarily a service.
Yeah, most of our students who we end up sending out of service have pretty significant medical needs or pretty significant behavioral challenges.
So can you give us an actual breakdown for the next time that you're here of the cost of those? Because when we're looking at the budget, I mean, a medical issue is very vague. So if it's something that we can provide versus what the cost of the tuition would be, I think for me, I'd be interested to see what that is. So whether it's
So I can
An
give you
extra
some
person.
generals. I can give you some
You
generals
have
for
to be
that.
very careful.
Careful.
Yeah.
Because the information is highly confidential and we don't want to risk identifying anyone.
which is why I wouldn't expect her to give it to us now. So I didn't know if there's
So I can
a
give you
way
some
without.
general overall costs of tuitions for, 10 or so placements that we use. And then I can give you some general costs of what services cost for just a cross-section of students.
Yeah, I mean, so what I'm thinking is when we're looking at our budget and trying to get these kids to come back into district, and I don't think it's gonna happen in the next year. I mean, again, that's an IEP decision for the team and I get that. But what is it that we could be looking at to say if we could bring in these services, whether it's psychological or whether it's medical or whether, I mean, and then what would that cost be to the district versus what an average tuition is, which counts busing and books and all that stuff? Because I just think it'd be interesting to see, and maybe it is more cost effective to have these kids come out of district, I don't know. But something in that general area so that when we're looking at the 5-year, we can say, this is what we'd like to get into our district.
Sure,
So
absolutely.
Can I
Mr.
follow?
O'Connor?
Well, it's kind of a follow-up to that anyways. Can you speak to whether or not you think, is that part of the evaluation process of whether or not you need to send somebody out of district or not? Is that
Absolutely.
cost allocation
Yeah,
for
absolutely. And
medical
so.
services versus,
Yep, and when it comes to medical needs, a lot of what we do is look at what a school nurse can do in a public school setting versus somebody in a different setting. So that factors into it. And I think we had spoken maybe earlier this year about a need for the district. I think I had said there's like we have a gap in what we can do for some of our middle school kids. We have the HOPE program for our elementary kids. We utilize RLA for our high school kids, but we really, we don't have anything in district for that age group.
Mr. Lynch?
So one of the things we're talking about for 5-year, and Karen and I, it's okay if I indulge just a little bit, is we're trying to build a linear path. If you look at the structure that we build for buildings and finance and how they correlate between our long-term method of planning, the idea for the 5-year, and Karen, I think that's what you're getting to, is to have a list of things, if we can reduce the out-of-district, what are your top 2 things you think may be a value add to reduce that number? That's kind of what we're looking for. So I think that's kind of the road we're going, right?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say, and I constantly say it, is we want kids back into district. I think it works good for the student, and I get it, but it's hard for you. So I'd like to know why it is. So it's not fair for us as a board to keep coming to you saying, we want these kids back in district without
Right.
saying, what's it gonna take to get there?
Yeah.
So I think that's the
question.
concern.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying you're gonna get it, but it's nice to know during budget season, and especially when we're looking at the 5-year, what are we looking at to say, I mean, you could look at somebody that's in elementary and think, once they get to the middle school, if we don't produce A, B, and C, they're gonna be going out of district. So maybe it is getting something that's like a HOPE program, or whatever the case, but I think looking into the future, and you would have that information, not, I don't want any information about a specific student, but it would be, if we don't get this, the cost to our district is going to be this amount. So even if it's, I'd like to look at the students that are out of district now, I think it'd be great to get them back in, but even if you were to see something that's coming up and saying, I see a hole, and if we don't fill this hole in the next 3 years, you're gonna have another student out of district, and seeing where that is, because not having it, and I get it, it's an IEP decision, it's not just your decision, it's not a parent's, I get the whole process, but looking in the future and saying, what can we potentially provide, I think would be fair of us to assist you in doing your job. So I think that's, and I like the fact that you're saying there's gap. How do we fill that gap? And that's on us as well as you to say, how do we, as a community, fill that gap? And I think looking ahead would be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that'd be a good back and forth.
Mr. Bray?
So one thing I just want to caution about too is one of the main things that drive a decision of putting a student out of district is looking at least restrictive environment. Keeping a student in their home school is always the goal, but that does not necessarily mean that's the least restrictive environment. If you have to pull the student out of the classroom more often than they're going to be in the classroom to be able to provide those special ed services, whether it be health or behavioral, you're not meeting least restrictive environment anymore, and they're not around their peers. So if their behavior impacts their learning enough to where they're not able to be in the classroom and get the instruction, and they're always out, they're no longer in the least restrictive environment. And the same thing goes for the medical. And at a certain point, if you build the structure around that and try to give it, that is appropriate. And I think we should look at that. But I will tell you that to build it correctly inside of a public school is going to cost you more per pupil than out of district, because you're sharing the cost with other schools to get those health facilities in place, to get those expertise in place. And if you're bringing it in, especially seeing how we have so many elementary schools, you can't, unless you're going to designate a school as that school for that specific need or service, you're not going to be able to hire those people for all the elementary schools. So there's a caution there about making sure you're looking at what's least restrictive for the child.
And I just want to answer that. I agree with you, but I'm also going to say that it's each individual student up to the IEP team. So it's not fair for us to say whether that's capable of us providing a service or not. That would be up to the IEP team, and I don't think it's up for us. All I'm asking for is, what do we see coming up the pipe? Again, whether it's medical or not, I think the expense is important, but I also think 100% keeping a child in our district. So I think there is that balance, but again, I don't even want to go that deep. I just want to say, what do we see coming forward? What could we provide as a district? Because money, for me, is not even the first top three. And I know that's probably sad, but for me, it's what's in the best interest of the student. And I'm assuming, you know what I mean, that's the same for everybody. But I just think knowing what's coming and knowing what we might have for expenses would be good for us to have.
Mr. Lynch?
I like that we have this collective body, because what's important is, I think Karen is the big bleeding heart, which is great, I love her for that, but having Nate's skill set and Sandy's skill set and Christian, it's a nice collaborative team, and even Tom with his background in the state services. So it's going to be good. I think there is a lot to bring to the table. Coming back to what Karen has been championing to do for us for the 5-year, is quintessentially what we're trying to do is, if Christian can go, hey, if we can avoid these X's by this is what we can build, I think it's brilliant. All we're asking is, what tools do you need in your toolbox to be a more productive team? And I think it's a good conversation. I like that we're having it, but we'll continue to drill down on that. I think it was a great question, by the way.
So I just want to make sure I know what I'm doing. Just to make sure. Do you still want a cross-section of tuitions and services? Or do you just want to know, what do we see as needs and?
I think it's important.
For me, I think it's important, and again, it's not going to be about the money for me, 100%. But I think it's going to be important for a lot of people to say, this medical issue is going to cost us this much versus us having a nurse, which is, you know what I mean, which is going to cost us this much. I think it's important for us to look at the cost. Not saying it would be my decision at all, but I'm saying I think it'd be something to be worthwhile. And I think what Nate said, if something's gonna cost an exorbitant amount and it's just better for the student to be out of district, I think it's good for us to know versus us not knowing, because the conversation keeps saying we need to get these kids back into district. And I'm the one chanting it, I get it. But I think having that cost, I think is important for us. I mean, it's important for us to look at.
I think it dispels any possible interpretation of information incorrectly. We can make an assumption drawn by what we think we know.
Yep.
If we get the cross-section and go, nope, that's not what I thought. And the educational part of it's important for the board members who are not fluent in that type of conversation. So I think it's a relevant conversation.
Okay, so next time I'm scheduled to bring back my normal quarterly report. So in addition to that, I'll bring you a cross-section of
That's great.
different tuitions and service costs. And then I will also put some ideas out there of what we're seeing as trends and what we think we're gonna need moving 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Does that work?
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for the homework. I'm just kidding. All right, any more questions? Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, item number 6 is budget. And so yeah, if we have any questions that we want to ask, we can direct them to Mrs. Barton.
The budget for instruction?
For
Special
special services.
She's not right on top of this.
I need to share this.
Hot one. I can borrow your charger.
Yeah.
It's all transportation.
I do have questions. Special ed transportation has been a topic that we continuously struggle with. You increased it by 3.2%. Do you think that's enough, or is it something that we're just gonna have to monitor as we go?
I'm actually thinking it's too high, but it does, what we typically do is we review and collaboratively with tuition, special services, and transportation.
Okay.
So those are 3 areas that we kind of look at together. And you're going to find in the instruction budget that it's going down, either tuition or related services are going down, and this is going up. So again, this is like a moving target all the time. So in total, I would say we leave it this way because the other side is going down, and again, net, we're doing okay.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
We don't need a motion, right?
We don't to send, we do need a motion. Is there a motion to send a full board the special services committee budget
To finance.
to finance? Move to finance committee.
I'm making that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 7 is public comment. If there's anyone from the public that would like to address the committee, please come forward, state your name. There being no one in public comment, we'll close. Item number 8 is other. Do we have any other? Okay, there being none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Or discussion? All in favor?
It's non-debatable. Aye.
Opposed? All right.